everybody. Welcome to the Partnership Guys podcast. This is season two, episode 23. I'm here with Rob Stoker and Todd Leonardis. And today we'd like to talk a little bit about what happens when one partner in a partnership evolves or changes faster or at a different speed than the other partner. One of the biggest tests of a long term partnership is when one partner changes. So things like their goals, their skill sets, their ambitions, their priorities. When those things start to change at a different rate than the other partner, and the partners start to drift apart, they start to grow apart. And how can you prevent or avoid that from becoming a problem in your partnership? Just on a personal level, when Todd and I first partnered up 25 plus years ago, I had little kids. Todd wasn't even married. And so I was growing very quickly as my kids grew. Things that I needed to do started to change. And so we realized really early on that that could be a potential problem. Todd was a bachelor at the time. And so his priorities were very different than mine. His need to kind of grow on a personal level were not the same as mine. Not that it was any better or worse, it was just different. And so, that growth we realized right from the beginning was really inevitable. It was something that we had to deal with. And so, we made time to make sure that we talked about that stuff. I don't know if you remember, Todd, in the beginning, how we kind of handled that.
Of course. I mean, it was, again, we both came out of different types of partnerships, but partnerships that collapsed on us. So we were very hesitant about becoming partners. I mean, it was the next thing. It was, so you go from, I'm never going to have a partner again to, oh, this guy might be a good partner. But we were very concerned. So we really took a lot of time to kind of talk about what is important. Now, again, to your point, I mean, a quarter of a century ago, we were living different lives, and they've changed every year since. And you have to be around people. You want people to evolve, personally, professionally. Like, that's what you want. You don't want somebody that's, stagnant, that doesn't grow, that doesn't move. But that can then require you to have some conversations and make some adjustments in the partnership, like we have over the years, right? I mean, now you have all adult children, they get married. I have toddlers, so my priorities from 25 years ago are way different than they are now, as I'm sure any parent understands and knows. So it's a mistake that I've seen people do that I didn't want to do it for myself. It's just expecting your partner to stay the same forever. Anybody who's married, you're growing as individuals, but you're trying to grow, stay aligned and grow as a pair as well. So, everything, there's so many things that happen that can change someone's priorities. Family situation, their health can change. You can have monster success, and that can change what people's priorities are. Age is huge for sure.
Yeah,
But
one of the concepts you guys write about in your book and talk about, and really, another one of those things that I saw when you guys were doing and putting together is your fundamental focus. And for me, I started my first business. We were 25. I started with a bunch of friends out of college. We had started businesses together before, but nothing like this. This was starting a trading floor in New York, and 25, 26, 27 years old. We were high stress environment, but we were, very close. And, we separated the work from personal stuff. And we would just on a Friday afternoon, if we had whether it was a good day, good week, bad week, it was just some times where we'd say, hey, let's all, get on a flight and go out to Chicago and see a Cubs game, or let's, go here or go there, or let's go out to a dinner and have some drinks. And I was the first. I was 26, got married, and 27 had my first kid, and a bunch of my friends were single guys, and it just started to be like, hey, for me, just you go, you go, you go. And there was, a different. We didn't even know your terminology at the time, but our fundamental focus, my fundamental focus, had changed. And it didn't affect us. It didn't affect our friendship, and it didn't affect our business relationship, but it was a change. It was a total change that I started to be like, nah, you guys go, you guys go. And slowly, as we got older and people started to grow up a little bit at different times, it just became a different trading floor. We went from a certain type of atmosphere to a much more mature atmosphere, and we all evolved with it. it was because there were just great conversations had around it and what we wanted out of life and out of that business. And it changed. And for me, it's changed and changed again and changed again. And I've had some great partnerships with people who have also evolved and evolved with me. And I love that. I love that it's an open conversation. I love that having these conversations with you two, and the fact that you two have always had such healthy conversations around where your fundamental focus lies and how it's changed. And it's just a great flowing conversation when it's done healthily. So
And
to
all the
me,
and a lot of the partnerships that we've talked to, the people we've talked to are it's exactly like that, right? You may not understand the terminology, you may not be as purposeful as you could be, but great partnerships understand that things are gonna change, people are going to evolve, and they plan for that. We take time, like you said, on a Friday afternoon to get together and have a drink or whatever, fly to Chicago to see a Cubs game, whatever works. Todd and I learned that very early on. I mean, we talk about and have talked about, going to lunch every day. And, one of the things that we recognized was that doing that in the very beginning gave us space to be able to talk about how we're changing, how things are changing in our lives and how we can plan for that and adjust what we're doing and how we're doing it for that. The partnerships that we see that are in trouble are the ones that don't spend the time to recognize the red flags. They don't see the signs that they're drifting apart from their partner. And that's a lot of times because, of course, poor communication, but also because priorities are changing and they're not talking about that. They're
Yeah,
not
people
talking.
start to get different visions for the future. We've experienced this with some of our other partnerships, different appetites for like growth, but mostly it ends up being risk. Everybody wants to grow, they just don't want to take the risk to grow.
Risk is a huge one if you don't.
Yeah, and that we see that a lot with big age disparities, which you would imagine, right? It's not like it's a mind blowing thing, but you have somebody in their 40s and somebody in their 60s. They have two different risk profiles. So I mean, sometimes partner might start to feel left behind because they see one partner going and expanding themselves or doing very very well on what their side of the business, their decision domains, and they might feel a little bit less relevant, so they'll start to pull back a little bit.
yeah, and in my great partnerships, not just that one, but so many others, it's been a conversation one way or the other. It's been a conversation. In my one really bad partnership that led to a 10-year lawsuit, there were no conversations. There were no conversations about what our fundamental focus is, what we wanted to do. We just started a business, and next thing we knew, it was again on paper, financially successful business and checks coming in. There was a lot of energy around that, and there was a lot of fun around that quickly. The energy and the dollars coming in were through the roof, but very quickly became we both had very different fundamental focuses, and it was never discussed. For me, it was raising my kids, being very involved. I'm with them at night, and he worked from 9 to 5, and night would be his time that he would work on this kind of side business for him, whereas I was the opposite. It was a full-time during the day business, but when my kids were home or on a court or on a field, I wasn't just there. I was coaching. I was heavily involved, and it's everything I wanted to do from when I was a kid, and that's where my focus was. And he was on a completely different page, and we never had those conversations. Just another huge, only in hindsight, red flag that if I would have seen, I would have had your book in front of me long before there were things that I would have done about it to have those conversations and put it all on the table early, because I think if I did that, then we would have never had a business and I never would have had a 10-year lawsuit, and that would have been just fine.
And the great thing about this is that it's a fixable problem, right? This misalignment and this drifting can be easily fixed. Trust a little bit harder, but understanding, where your partner's at and, understanding what their goals are and what their fundamental focuses are easy. They're easy things to fix, not easy, necessarily easy conversations to have, but easy things to fix. And, it's about recognizing when that drift starts to happen because it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, how long were you and your partner in business before it all went to hell and you guys started suing each other? I mean, it was a while,
Months.
right? Yeah.
But it was well, till actual lawsuit, it was in a full year, but it was a few months before these issues started to be, start to come. And it was slow. It was one at a time, and it was slow. And the money covered all of that up. It
Uh-huh.
was, we have something here. We knew we had something here, and that's what covered up all. But like we always talk about, the lack of communication and the incredibly weak partnership that we had on so many levels, that was always going to win out. It was the business had no chance. And again, it's only in hindsight and only looking back at it that it was really from the start that it had no chance. It was just, and it made it worse that it was a good business because there were dollars coming in, and that means dollars to fight over and think differently about that, just on completely different pages when it came to goals. And so, for me, like you guys always talk about, growing together doesn't mean growing identically. He had a different vision for how he was going to live his life, and I had a different vision, and that's okay. It was just never
Yeah.
discussed, and it
As
was
long as it's
never
discussed, yeah.
accepted by discussed and accepted
And
is
bought
put
in,
it all
yeah.
out
Yeah, you
there.
need
And if it's not accepted, then it's not going to work. If we realized that early, it would have been a million times better than what it was.
But at least you would have been having the conversation.
yeah. Yeah, cuz once the conversations aren't, once the conversations become less and less about building something together and more about just you and what you're doing, you're drifting apart. It's a great red flag there. And partnerships rarely drift apart overnight. They drift. Some people say they drift one conversation at a time. I think they drift one missed conversation at a time. Keeping silent when you should be talking is when that drifting really starts to happen. And again, we talked about uncomfortable conversations. We do that all the time. Doesn't mean that, everything is rainbows and lollipops. It's a business though, and you're coming into this with presumably trust and respect, and you should be able to talk to your partner about what's going on to you or what you see going on with your partner, just to kind of get it out there and figure it out. Like if Steve and I didn't share the amount of stuff that we've shared over the years in our lives outside of the business, what we're dealing with inside the business, we absolutely would have drifted apart, and because he wouldn't have known. We've been, imagine 25 years. I mean, the life cycles our lives have gone through, right? And if you're not having these conversations, inevitably that's when you start building your own story about what's going on with the other person, right? And you start building resentment that might not even need to be there, or probably shouldn't be there, but it might be unwarranted. But it's just a lack of that information in the conversation that causes it.
And it's not difficult questions to ask, right? It can be really simple questions. Like if you're working on a project or coming into a situation in the business, asking something simple like, well, what does a win look like for you? And then talking about what a win looks like for each other, or what does success look like for you in this particular situation. You don't have to get big picture. It can be little stuff. It can be things like, okay, these are the 10 things we need to do in order to accomplish this goal. What's most important to you and why? These are quick conversations. You can have them over lunch. You can just jump into somebody's office and talk about it for 2 minutes. But it's having those little conversations, and eventually those lead to bigger conversations about, a larger part of your life. But start with just like, what does a win look like? That tells you a lot about where somebody's mindset is and what's going on with it.
To our
Yeah, I
credit,
think
we
that-
did that early. We did that early, man. It was to our credit.
Think
Things
that
Continue to
early,
do it
often,
every
and
day.
continue to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Continue to do it every day.
Yeah.
'Cause you
And
do
I-
want to talk about the future before it arrives. You know what I mean? Like, so you can plan a little bit. There's adjustments I've had to make in my life for Steven. There's adjustments he's absolutely made in his life for me. And we're happy to do it for each other. We're happy to do it for each other because we are bought in on each other's success in the business, of course, but outside of the business. I spend, more time with you guys awake than I do my family. And, so I am invested and in you guys. I know, and aren't I blessed? I'm invested in your guys' success and happiness. Yours is mine, as far as I'm concerned. So I want to know when things are changing. And we're like, and we talked about it a bunch of times. We're all going through life changes all the time, and they don't always sync up. Ours aren't syncing up right now, but they're aligned in a sense that we all know what the others are dealing with. So it's key, and it's important to kind of, you talked about our fundamental focus earlier, Rob. It's really important to revisit that. We say try to do it on a yearly basis, and it might not change at all. You'd be like, no, this is my life. This is how I feel right now. But if you're not looking at it, you're not going to really realize, oh, actually I am shifting. This isn't what is, where I want to put my energy and effort into anymore. This outcome, this goal, whatever it might be. Like, I have new ones now. So you got to personally go through this so you can then relay that to your partners.
And the key to really understanding is to not be judgmental about it. It would be super easy because I've already raised my kids. Like, I went through the whole process. For me to hear what Todd is doing, raising his kids, and me judging that and saying, well, that's ridiculous. You need to do this or that. I would never say that. Todd's going to do it his way, and that's totally cool because it works for him. And so, that not bringing ego into those conversations, not bringing judgment into those conversations, allow those conversations to be honest and open so that you can really listen and understand where your partner is. And that's the key to really growing. I think, Rob, you just said not growing, the same, not growing identically, but certainly growing, in parallel, different ways, but you're still both growing. Or you're all growing if it's a
Yeah, no, and being supportive and vulnerable and understanding that. So for me in that bad partnership, I would work all from early morning till dinner time, and I would go to different people's houses and sell and go to townships. And that's when his day job working from home ended, and he would come over and he would see me packing up bags of basketballs, and I'm putting my kids in the car to take them to practice. And he would say, you're just leaving and going out to coach your kids for the night. And there was anger. He had anger for me doing that. Was we just, had that day, and now I'm here ready to work. And because I'm here and I'm ready to work, you should be here too. How can you just be leaving?
That's
And it
the
was
judgment I'm talking about, right?
100%. It was bad. And then I started to judge him right back. I was like, you obviously, the fact that you don't have any interest in spending time with your family. I thought just coming in, we have kids the same age, and so we have the same goals. We didn't. I mean, I could not have been more wrong about that assumption that, living next to each other, same town, raising kids the same age, we generally had the same goals. And I could not have been more off. We had very different goals. It just was never discussed, and it was never discussed openly. And one of the big red flags was I didn't want to discuss it with him. It was so much easier not to talk about it. It was just, let's just let this good business on paper do what it does and just learn to somehow coexist and get through it, because the business is really good and we're hitting it at the right time. I just had no clue at the time that we had no chance because of the bad partnership.
And the best partnerships we see focus on outcomes, not on the path to get there. I might do something a certain way, or I might have a certain time frame I want to get something done, and you guys will have a different perspective on that, and that's totally okay. The objective is to get to that outcome, right?
Yeah,
And so
different
focusing
goals
on
can still be compatible.
Yeah.
Having different goals, you can still be compatible. So, but it's about the outcome. To your point, absolutely.
And focusing on the shared, outcome. So for me, one of the great partnerships I have, and it's not a great business right now, is Hummingbird Sports' girls lacrosse headgear. We have all had the same focus that someday we're going to see every girl in the country wearing that headgear. So we've been focused on making what is going to be an amazing headgear. I actually have samples coming. Show you guys next week. We all have the same mission to protect as many girls as we can with headgear in that sport. And that's what always wins out, is that mission and that supporting each other. And what can I do for you to help us get there? Because it is a mission. It truly is a mission that has taken a lot of great people all together, understanding each other's roles, adjusting each other's roles as strengths and interests evolve, supporting each other, focusing on those shared outcomes, growing together, all of it. Great partnerships like the partnership that I have now with you guys. There's nothing like it. There's just nothing like it. It's amazing. It really is amazing to have somebody in the world that you're in that can support you, understands what you're going through, can also say, hey, I understand what you're going, but maybe there's a different lane that you could take here. The understanding that from in the business and the openness with each other to be able to say that and then be able to take that in, as opposed to getting defensive or saying, no, I'm going to do it my way. And that was my bad partnership, was all of that was there, was if you're not thinking my way, you're thinking the wrong way. And
that's
went both
that's a
ways.
choice. That's a choice. You get to choose whether you want to achieve a shared outcome, achieve a shared goal, or whether you want to judge how the other person is going to get there, and not understanding what's going on in their lives and what's important to them. And you should always, in a good partnership, you always choose that support and that alignment that you want to have towards working towards shared goals and shared outcomes.
And you got to support each other's changing seasons in life. You really do. And, you know, it's because we have found that the strongest partnerships adapt to this change as opposed to resist it. And that's really where that growth comes in long term, both inside the business and certainly outside the business.
Great summary of this conversation. Adapt versus resist.
Absolutely.
So thanks, guys. Good conversation. I want to invite everybody to check us out on thepartnershipguys.com. You can listen to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Partnership Guys is here to help in any way we can. We really strive to help partners achieve the win. And sometimes that's about building a partnership. It's about fixing a partnership. It could be about ending a partnership or exiting a partnership. Either way, we want to try to help partners achieve the win, which we define as clarity and momentum, and the ability to be able to walk away from a situation feeling better about it after you've gone through the process. So thank you very much. Thanks, Rob and Todd, and we will talk to you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.